Relative pronouns. In Greek, has, he, and ha. Now, if you do not know what a relative pronoun is, or if you're not familiar with it, then go ahead and pause the video and go do a little bit of research on relative pronouns. Very simple, but if you are familiar with them, let's jump in. These are the relative pronouns in Greek. And if you look, it's just quite a large amount to remember who and which. Now, relative pronouns introduce relative clauses. So, like the man who walked his dog. Who walked his dog is a clause because it's a subject and a verb. But it's being used as a modifier to the man who walked his dog. So relatives introduce relative clauses, and they allow a whole clause to function as the adjective or modifier for an individual word. But here we have the masculine, feminine, and neuter relatives. Now, what do you notice? If I zoom in here on the masculine, let's read through them. You see the rough breathing mark there. Has, hu, ho, han. Hoi, hon, hois, hus. Sounds familiar? This is asuoan, oionoisus. These are the second declension endings. And notice they became relative pronouns. At least right in front of our eyes they did. That is, the relative pronouns are simply the endings of our declensions. Here we see the masculine is following the second declension, except we take the ending and we put a rough breathing mark with it. Has, hu, ho, han, hoi, hon, hois, hus. If we look at the feminine, we can see here feminine, singular, he, heis, he, hain. Hi, hon, heis, has. So that's just asein, ionisas. So these are the first declension endings for the feminine relative pronoun. Let's look at the neuter. The neuter follows ha, hu, ho, ha, ha, hon, hois, ha. This is the second declension neuter set. The only difference between this and the chart we've learned is that we don't see the nu here for the nominative singular and the accusative singular. So it's not anuoan, aon oisa, like we've learned, but like I noted the other day, the nu can be missing. So you can just have the omicron, ha, which we have here. Ha, hu, ho, ha, ha, hon, hois, ha. These are the second declension neuter endings. So if we come back out, you find a pattern here for masculine, feminine, and neuter. This would be labeled as a 2-1-2 pattern. And this is where I'm introducing this to you all. From now on, we're going to see patterns, declension patterns for masculine, feminine, and neuter, like we see here with the relative pronoun. In the coming time, we'll see it with adjectives. Adjectives will follow a 2-1-2 pattern, but not all of them. Some adjectives will follow a 3-1-3 pattern. But when you see that 3-1-3, 2-1-2, now you're knowing that it follows the pattern of masculine, feminine, and neuter. It's identifying the declension pattern for those genders in that order. Masculine, feminine, and then neuter. 2-1-2 in this case. Now, this right here, which says hi with the rough breathing mark, and this over here, which says hi with the rough breathing mark, these are two different words. This one is the definite article. This one is the relative pronoun. Now, the only difference between them is then what? This extra diacritical mark, which means this extra accent mark. And we're learning to distinguish between the article, which can follow the same pattern as the relative pronoun, and we're learning to distinguish them by noting that the relative pronouns always have two accent marks or two diacritical marks. They will always have the rough breathing mark, and they will always have one extra accent mark of some kind. Okay? Always two, though. The article, just one. So that's what we're going to keep in mind here as we go forward, and that will always enable us to tell the difference between a definite article and a relative pronoun. All right? So let's go forward here. And we have, well, ton, hai, hoi. Ton, is that a relative pronoun or a definite article? Well, two things give it away as a definite article. The tau here, it's not just the ending, and then only one diacritical mark, and it's not a rough breathing mark. So this is definitely an article. What about this? Hai. Well, only the rough breathing mark, not a second mark, so that's the definite article. What about hoi? Same thing. See it? Just the rough breathing mark, no other accent mark. So that's the definite article. Now, that could be a relative pronoun. If we just added one more mark to it, like this, we would have a relative pronoun. But without that extra mark, we have just the definite article. What about down here? Hon. Now you see here that this one has the rough breathing mark, plus it has the extra accent mark. So this is a relative pronoun. What about this one? Hai. Yes, rough breathing mark, extra accent. Hoi, rough breathing mark, extra accent. See, so these are all relative pronouns down here. These are all definite articles up here. All right, here we have a chart, and we can see that ha is a relative pronoun. No, this is the definite article, one breathing mark, one rough breathing mark, but then no accent mark. So this is just the definite article. But we can see over here we have the relative because it has the accent mark plus that rough breathing mark. So two marks. So here's a relative. Now, we can tell the gender of this relative pronoun now. See, is this an asuoan oionoisus ending, or is it a sein ionisas? Go ahead and try to give that answer. This is asuoan oionoisus. You can see, first of all, it starts with an omicron, not an alpha or an eta, and that's a giveaway for a second declension. That means that this is either masculine or neuter, but because it's nominative, asuoan, we know it's masculine and not neuter. So this is a masculine, singular, nominative, relative pronoun. That's amazing. In just a matter of a handful of minutes, you are now right there where you can begin to parse, identify and parse the relative pronouns. So you're going to see that by learning the declension endings, first declension, second declension, and then in the future third declension, you're going to get a lot of mileage out of that. And we'll see that more and more. But let's go on here. Who, you can tell, is relative pronoun as the rough breathing mark plus another accent. Who, so there's a masculine singular genitive. Ho, with the iota subscript for dative, is also a relative pronoun. And then han, asuoan, hashu ho han. So this is a comparison between the relative pronoun, masculine singular, and the definite article, masculine singular. So you can see here there's a slight difference between the endings here in the nominative, singular, but then when you go to the genitive, the endings are the same, but there's some differences. Same with the dative. The endings are the same, but there's some differences. Same with the accusative. The endings are the same. There's some differences. Okay, with that then, let's go on to an important point a very important point about relative pronouns. Something that you can easily miss, but you're not going to, because you're going to get it down right here from the beginning. So building it up that way, this is critical to understand. You don't want to learn this later. You want to learn it right now. So if you don't have a piece of paper and a pen out, I would get a piece of paper and a pen out. I would get this down and then get it right in the brain. Relative pronouns agree with their antecedent in gender and number. That's not the point. They do, but that's not the point that you need to know. Relative pronouns agree with their antecedent in gender and number. Here's the point. They don't necessarily agree in case, though. Yeah? They do agree in gender and number, but the case is something independent. The case of the relative pronoun will not be determined by its antecedent, except in one case, which will, no pun intended, which we'll learn in the future. One, it's called attraction, when something happens to make them of the same case. But no, that's not the rule, though. The rule is that the relative pronoun gets its case from somewhere else, okay? Not its antecedent. Okay, let's illustrate this a little bit. So if we have, let's say here, so we have this this lady, and the word here for a woman in Greek is gune. And that does come from the same root as the gen root, which we get our word Genesis from. Okay, so, but there's gune, and you can see aes aen. This is a nominative singular. It's feminine singular nominative. Now, what relative pronoun would we use to refer to her? We could refer to her with hey. All right, so that's a feminine singular nominative pronoun. Hey, so we could say the woman which did this. Now watch this. Okay, if we, keeps popping up there. If we change the word woman to a genitive singular, so now this is a third declension word, but it's a genitive singular. So we would have to write now the genitive here. We could refer to her in the exact same way. We could still call her hey. So this is, let's just say this is the house gunaikos of a woman. Which woman? A woman who used to come to church or something like that. So these still agree in gender and number. They're both feminine and singular, but they don't agree in case. This one is a genitive, and that is a nominative. So with that in mind, let's go on here to this point. So relative pronouns get their case from their function in the clause they introduce. So like the woman who used to come to church. Who is part of the clause used to come to church. In fact, who is the subject of that clause? Who used to come to church. So in that case, the relative pronoun would be in the nominative case, no matter what its antecedent is in. Relative pronouns, number 2, do not normally get their case from their antecedent. So that's the rule that I'm trying to stick in the depths of your mind, right from the very first moment of hearing it. Okay, so relative pronouns agree with their antecedent in 2 ways. What is it? Gender and number. But their third element, which is case, doesn't come from its its antecedent, it comes from its function in its own clause. We'll see more about this, but let's get it straight right from the get-go. So here's some examples. So we have here this sentence from Matthew 24:46. Blessed is the servant. Notice this. Servant is hadulas. We can see as, asuoan, so this is a masculine singular nominative. The servant. So this is masculine singular nominative. Now we have a relative here referring to servant. I shouldn't have it on the screen. I should ask you, what will its case be? And you would say, I don't know. Because it's not going to come from the word servant, which is in the nominative. What is it? It's in the accusative, asuoan. As-u-o-an. It's in the accusative. It is masculine. It is singular. It agrees in those two ways, but not in the third way, which is case. Why? Because in its own clause, which is here, whom his Lord shall find so doing. Now, who is the subject of this clause right here? Who shall find? Well, his Lord. So Lord is the subject. So this would be in the nominative. Lord is the subject of shall find. And who or what will he find? What's the object? He will find whom? In this case, the relative pronoun is functioning as the object of shall find, and therefore it's in the accusative case. All right, let's go to another example. Example number 2. Here we have a phrase from Matthew 13:33. Leaven, which a woman took. Leaven is the word that is the antecedent to which. Notice that leaven is in the, what dative we can see here, but we can see it here. The iota subscript with a, so ain, asein, asan, ionisas, asein, aas, a. So zume is a feminine singular dative. Its relative is feminine singular accusative, aase, ain. Now we can tell this is relative because it has the two marks. One of them is a rough breathing mark. So relative. So it's leaven, which gune, a woman, you see it's in the nominative there. Aase, ain, aase, ain. A woman took. And there's some things there, but we'll skip. So a woman took what? She took which. So which is what? Which is the leaven. In its own clause, the relative pronoun is functioning as the object to the verb. She took which. Grammatically, that's what she did. She took which. And which refers to the leaven. Last here is this phrase, this verse, how that he was caught up into paradise and heard unspeakable words, which it is not lawful for a man to utter. If we look at the relative here, it's an alpha. Now, you might jump over to first declension and think, asein, asan. But no, in the first declension for relatives, relative pronouns, it uses the eta for the singular, aasein, not the alpha. So where would you find a single alpha? You'd find it in the neuter. Remember? Anuoan, a, on, ois, a. If you need to, pause and look that up. Have it sharp in your mind. Okay, this is very, very important. Don't just skim through. You want to really keep that stuff stirred up really strongly until it begins to congeal. So this is a relative pronoun. It's a neuter, plural, either nominative or accusative. And what is it referring to then? Why a neuter plural? Well, let's go back. Is it words? The words, which is not lawful for a man to utter? Yes, it is words. How do we know? Because words, now this is a third declension word, but words are neuter plural. And it refers to that. Okay, so this is just a brief, concise, but meaty introduction to relative pronouns. Right here, you have enough to work with them, actually. Just in this little bit of time, enough to work with relative pronouns and get up on your feet with them. So now make sure you master this, take it further than I'm giving in the video, and then we'll go forward next step next time. So God bless you. Bye for now.